A hardworking waitress believes the quiet dishwasher in her restaurant is just another struggling worker, until a mysterious black luxury car arrives and reveals he is actually the heir to a billionaire empire who came to secretly test himself and discovers a life-changing truth about love and sacrifice. Every day, Afua served strangers with a smile, while silently carrying a life full of sacrifice. Morning light slowly filtered through the large front windows of the small neighborhood restaurant, painting the wooden tables in soft golden shades. The place was called Mercy's Kitchen, a quiet family restaurant that had stood on the corner of the street for nearly 20 years. To most people, it was just another place to eat breakfast or grab a late dinner. But for Afua, it was everything. Afua moved quickly between the tables, balancing 2 plates in one hand and a pot of coffee in the other. Her steps were fast but graceful, practiced from years of doing the same routine every single day. 2 pancakes and eggs for table 4, she said gently as she set the plates down. The customers smiled politely. Some nodded in thanks. Others barely looked up from their phones. Afua didn't mind. She simply smiled back, because that smile was part of the job. Behind the counter, the old register beeped as another order came in. The cook shouted something from the kitchen. A bell rang as the front door opened and closed. The restaurant was always busy, always loud, always moving, and right in the middle of it all was Afua. But what the customers didn't see was the weight she carried long after the tables were cleared. When the rush slowed down, Afua stepped behind the counter and opened a small notebook she kept hidden under the register. Inside were numbers, bills, overdue payments, grocery lists. Her fingers paused on the page. Rent, electricity, school supplies for her younger brother. The numbers didn't add up. Not again. For a moment, her smile disappeared. How long can I keep doing this alone? She thought quietly, but just as quickly as the worry appeared, she closed the notebook and took a deep breath. Another customer waved from across the room. Afua straightened her apron and walked back with the same warm smile she always wore. Because the truth was simple. Afua had once dreamed of something bigger. Years ago, she had been offered a scholarship to study medicine. Professors had told her she had a bright future ahead, a chance to become a doctor. But life had different plans. When her mother passed away suddenly, the restaurant nearly closed. Her younger brother was still in school, too young to understand how fragile everything had become. So Afua made a choice. She stayed. She worked longer hours, took double shifts, learned every job in the restaurant, from serving tables to cleaning the floors late at night. All to keep the doors open, all to keep her brother's future safe. And she never complained, because for Afua, family came before dreams. The bell above the restaurant door suddenly rang again. Afua looked up automatically. Another customer, she thought. Just another ordinary day. But standing in the doorway was someone she had never seen before. A young man, quiet, calm, observing the room carefully. He didn't look like the usual customers who came rushing in for coffee or breakfast. Instead, he simply stood there for a moment, studying the restaurant, studying everything. Afua walked toward him politely. "Hello," she said with her usual warm smile. "Table for one?" But the stranger shook his head slowly. "I'm actually looking for a job," he said. Afua blinked in surprise. A job? Of all the things she expected to hear that morning, that wasn't one of them. And somehow, something about the quiet stranger made the moment feel different. Like the calm before a storm. Because sometimes, the most ordinary days hide the moments that quietly change everything. When the stranger asked for the lowest job in the restaurant, Afua had no idea he was hiding the biggest secret. The afternoon sun filtered softly through the restaurant's dusty front windows, painting warm golden lines across the wooden floor. Inside, the small family restaurant hummed with its usual rhythm. Plates clinking, quiet chatter between customers, and the steady sound of running water from the kitchen sink. Afua moved quickly between the tables, balancing 2 steaming plates on her tray. Her smile was gentle and practiced, the kind that reassured customers even when her own heart felt heavy. Long hours, unpaid bills, and the constant worry about her younger brother had become a silent part of her daily life. But she never let the customers see that. Just as she placed a bowl of soup on a table near the window, the small bell above the restaurant door rang softly. Afua glanced up. A young man stepped inside. He wasn't dressed in anything special. Just a simple shirt, worn jeans, and shoes that looked like they had traveled many miles. But there was something about the way he walked. Calm, confident, almost composed. He looked around the restaurant quietly, as if studying every corner before taking another step. Afua wiped her hands on her apron and approached him politely. "Good afternoon," she said with a warm smile. "Table for one?" The young man shook his head gently. "I'm actually here to ask about the dishwasher job." Afua blinked in surprise. Most people who applied for that position walked in nervously or spoke quickly, eager to explain why they needed the work. But this man's voice was steady, polite, almost refined. "What's your name?" Afua asked. "Kofi," he replied simply. For a brief moment their eyes met. There was something unusual in his calm expression. Not arrogance, not pride, just a quiet confidence that didn't quite match the humble job he was asking for. Afua tilted her head slightly. "Have you worked in a restaurant before?" she asked. Kofi gave a small smile. "Not exactly like this one," he said. His answer was strange, but somehow honest. Afua studied him for a moment. The restaurant desperately needed help in the kitchen, and the dishwasher from last week had quit without warning. Still, something about him felt different. Why does he seem like someone who belongs somewhere much bigger than this place? She wondered. Kofi stood patiently, hands folded in front of him, waiting for her answer without pressure or impatience. Finally, Afua nodded. "Well, we do need help," she said. "The job isn't easy. Long hours. Lots of dishes." "I don't mind," Kofi replied calmly. For the first time, Afua noticed the faintest hint of determination in his eyes. It was the kind of determination that usually came from people chasing something much bigger than a simple job. She gestured toward the kitchen door. "All right," she said. "Let's see how you do." As Kofi followed her toward the back of the restaurant, neither of them realized that this small decision, this simple dishwasher job, was about to change both of their lives in ways neither of them could imagine. And sometimes, the most unexpected people walk into our lives wearing the simplest clothes. A dishwasher who could repair machines and solve business problems. Something didn't make sense. The first few days after Kofi started working at the restaurant passed quietly. At least, that's what everyone expected. Every morning, he arrived before the kitchen fully woke up. The cooks would still be tying their aprons while he calmly rolled up his sleeves and began washing the tall stacks of dishes left from the night before. His movements were steady, careful, almost methodical. At first, no one paid much attention to him. After all, dishwashers came and went all the time. But by the third day, something unusual began to happen. One afternoon, the old kitchen mixer suddenly stopped working. The machine had been unreliable for months, making strange grinding noises whenever the chefs tried to use it. Usually, when it broke down, everyone simply complained and waited for the owner to call a repairman. That day was different. Kofi quietly walked over, wiped his hands on a towel, and crouched beside the machine. Without saying much, he examined the wires, adjusted a small loose part inside, and tightened a screw with a simple tool he found in a drawer. A few seconds later, the mixer roared back to life. The chef stared at him in disbelief. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked. Kofi only smiled slightly. "I've fixed a few things before," he said calmly, before returning to the sink as if nothing had happened. But that wasn't the only strange thing. Over the next few days, the chaotic kitchen slowly began to change. Shelves that had always been messy suddenly became neatly organized. Supplies were placed in logical order. Even the storage room looked cleaner and easier to navigate. No one had asked Kofi to do any of it. He simply noticed problems and quietly solved them. One evening during a slow hour, Afua overheard him speaking with the restaurant owner near the counter. They were discussing the rising cost of ingredients and the slow sales during weekdays. Kofi listened carefully before speaking. "If you adjust the menu slightly and promote a special dish on weekdays," he suggested politely, You might attract more customers during the quiet hours. The owner blinked in surprise. That actually makes sense, he admitted. Afua stood nearby, pretending to wipe a table, but her ears caught every word. How does a dishwasher know so much about running a business? She wondered silently. Later that night, whispers began spreading among the staff. I heard he fixed the freezer this morning. Someone said he studied business before. Maybe he used to own a restaurant. The rumors grew with every passing day. And yet, Kofi never acted like someone important. He continued washing dishes, sweeping floors, and helping anyone who asked. Quiet, polite, humble. But the mystery around him was growing. Afua watched him carefully from across the kitchen one evening as he calmly stacked plates beside the sink. Something about him didn't fit the simple role he had chosen. Who was this man? Really? Sometimes the greatest secrets hide behind the quietest people. She could have been a doctor, but instead she chose sacrifice. The restaurant was quieter than usual that evening. The dinner rush had ended, and only a few customers remained near the windows. Warm lights hung above the tables, casting a soft glow across the room. Afua was wiping down the counter when Kofi finished organizing the storage shelves in the back. Over the past days, they had grown more comfortable around each other. Their conversations had become longer, more personal. Sometimes they talked about food, sometimes about dreams, and sometimes about life. That night, as they sat on the back steps of the restaurant during a short break, Kofi noticed something different in Afua's eyes. She looked tired, not just physically, but in a deeper way. You work very hard, he said gently. Afua smiled, though it carried a quiet weight. I have to, she replied. Kofi hesitated for a moment, then asked softly, do you ever wish things were different? For a second, she didn't answer. The night air moved gently around them, and the distant sounds of the city filled the silence. Finally, she spoke. I had another path once. Her voice was calm, but something inside it trembled. She explained that years ago, she had been accepted into medical school with a full scholarship. It was everything she had worked for, a chance to become a doctor, a future many people only dream about. But when her mother passed away suddenly, everything changed. Her younger brother was still a child. There was no one else to take care of him. No relatives nearby. No financial support strong enough to carry both school and family responsibilities. So Afua made a choice. She declined the scholarship. I stayed, she said simply. The restaurant needed someone, and my brother needed me. Kofi listened carefully, his heart growing heavier with every word. She gave up her dream so someone else could have theirs, he thought. He looked at her with new understanding. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Afua shook her head. No. My brother is studying at a good university now. He is safe. He is building his future. That is enough for me. She spoke without bitterness, without complaint, just acceptance. But Kofi could see the truth in her eyes, the quiet sacrifice she carried every single day. Who would choose family over a lifelong dream without hesitation? Only someone with extraordinary strength. He realized something important in that moment. Afua was not just a waitress running a small restaurant. She was the foundation holding everything together. The reason the lights were still on. The reason her brother could sleep peacefully at night. Her kindness wasn't weakness. It was courage. Kofi felt a deep respect growing inside him. A respect that slowly turned into admiration. He understood now why she worked so hard. Why she stayed late. Why she never complained. Because she had already given up something precious. And she did it with grace. As they sat under the soft evening sky, Kofi looked at her differently. Not just as someone he worked beside, but as someone who had quietly carried an entire future on her shoulders. What started as simple kitchen conversations was quietly becoming something much deeper. The restaurant lights were dimmed, and the last customers had finally left. Outside, the street was quiet, with only the soft hum of passing cars in the distance. Inside, Afua and Kofi worked together to clean the kitchen after a long day. This had slowly become their routine. Late nights, Empty tables. Shared silence. Afua wiped the counters while Kofi finished stacking the freshly washed dishes. The sound of water running in the sink filled the room, steady and calming. For the first time in years, the restaurant felt less heavy, less lonely. "You always stay until everything is perfect," Kofi said gently, placing the last plate on the shelf. Afua smiled slightly. "My mother taught me that. Leave a place better than you found it." They worked in comfortable silence for a few moments. But this silence was different. It wasn't awkward. It felt safe. Kofi glanced at her carefully. "What do you dream about?" he asked. Afua paused, surprised by the question. No one had asked her that in a long time. She turned off the sink and leaned against the counter. "Dreams feel far away sometimes," she replied softly. "But I still think about becoming a doctor one day, helping people, making a difference." Her voice carried both hope and quiet sadness. Kofi listened closely. "She deserves that future," he thought. "What about you?" Afua asked. Kofi hesitated for a brief moment. For the first time, he wasn't sure how honest he could be. His real life felt too large to explain, too complicated. "I want to build something meaningful," he said carefully. "Something that helps people, not just makes money." Afua looked at him thoughtfully. "That's a good dream." Their eyes met for a second longer than usual. There was something new in that moment. A connection deeper than simple friendship. A shared understanding. They had both faced loss. Both carried responsibility. Both knew what it meant to sacrifice for others. And now, in the quiet kitchen, they were discovering something unexpected. Comfort in each other's presence. Kofi noticed how Afua tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear when she was thinking. He noticed how she hummed softly while cleaning. He noticed how her strength didn't make her cold. It made her gentle. Afua, in turn, noticed how Kofi always listened. Carefully when she spoke. How he remembered small details. How he treated everyone with respect, no matter their job. One evening, while turning off the kitchen lights, Afua accidentally brushed against his hand. Neither of them pulled away immediately. The moment felt different, warmer, more meaningful. Why does being around him feel so natural? She wondered quietly. They stood there in the dim light, surrounded by the familiar smells of the kitchen. For the first time, the restaurant didn't feel like just a workplace. It felt like a place where something new was beginning. They weren't in love yet, but something had shifted. A quiet friendship had started to grow roots. And neither of them realized that this gentle connection was about to change their lives in ways they never expected. When Afua asked for one simple promise, Kofi suddenly felt the weight of his secret. The evening was calm, and the restaurant had already closed for the night. The chairs were stacked neatly on the tables, and the soft glow of the kitchen lights made everything feel peaceful. Afua was finishing her final checks at the counter while Kofi washed the last few utensils in the sink. They had grown closer over the past weeks. Their conversations felt easy now, natural, comfortable. That night, Afua leaned against the counter and watched him work. "You know," she said with a small smile, "there is one thing I value more than anything." Kofi looked up. "What's that?" "Honesty." Her voice was gentle, but serious underneath. Afua walked closer, folding her arms lightly. "I believe if people are honest with each other, everything else becomes easier." Kofi nodded slowly. She continued, half joking but with meaning in her eyes. "So promise me something." He paused, sensing the shift in her tone. "Promise you'll never lie to me, no matter what happens." The words hung in the air. Kofi's hands stopped moving. For a brief moment, the kitchen felt completely silent. Afua wasn't smiling now. She was looking at him with steady sincerity, the kind that came from someone who had trusted others before and learned the cost of broken promises. Kofi swallowed gently. He wanted to answer immediately, but the truth was heavy inside him. "She doesn't know who I really am," he thought. He had already hidden his real identity. He had already been living a life built on silence. And now she was asking for something that felt impossible to guarantee. His heart beat faster. What would she think if she knew everything? Would she still look at him the same way? Afua stepped closer, lowering her voice slightly. I'm serious. If we can't trust each other, then what do we really have? Her words were simple, but they reached deep into his chest. Kofi met her eyes. They were calm, open, full of belief. He felt the weight of his secret like never before. For a second, he considered telling her everything right then. The truth about his father, the billion-dollar empire, the 30-day test. But fear held him back. Not fear of losing money, fear of losing her. I promise, he said quietly. The words came out gently, but inside his mind was racing. Please don't let this come out the wrong way, he thought. Afua smiled, satisfied with his answer. She didn't know that the man standing in front of her was carrying the biggest secret in the room. And as they finished cleaning together in the quiet kitchen, neither of them realized how much that simple promise would soon be tested. Because sometimes honesty is not just a request. It becomes the foundation of everything that follows. The truth her brother discovered would finally expose the sacrifice Afua tried to hide. The restaurant was lively that afternoon, filled with the familiar sounds of customers talking and dishes clinking together. Afua was behind the counter, helping a customer when the front door suddenly opened wider than usual. The bell above the door rang loudly. She looked up. Standing in the doorway was her younger brother, smiling proudly, holding a small bag in one hand. He looked taller than she remembered, more confident, more grown. Yo! Afua exclaimed, her face lighting up instantly. Without hesitation, she rushed around the counter and pulled him into a tight hug. For a moment, everything else disappeared. The customers, the noise, the stress. It was just a sister and her brother reunited. I finished early, Yo said happily. I wanted to surprise you. Afua stepped back, looking at him with pride. You did it. I knew you would. Yo had just completed university with strong grades. The future was finally opening in front of him. Afua's heart felt full seeing him standing there, successful and strong. But then Yo's expression slowly changed. It became serious. He gently guided her to a quiet table in the corner of the restaurant. Afua, he began softly, I need to tell you something. Her smile faded slightly. What is it? Yo took a deep breath. I found out about the scholarship. The words landed like a quiet storm. Afua froze for a moment. What scholarship? The medical one, he said. From years ago. Her hands tightened around the edge of the table. How did you find out? She asked quietly. Auntie Mercy told me, Yo replied. She thought I already knew. Afua closed her eyes briefly. She had worked so hard to keep that secret safe. Yo's voice began to tremble. You gave up your full scholarship for me. The restaurant noise seemed distant now. Afua tried to smile. It wasn't like that. But Yo shook his head gently. It was exactly like that. His eyes filled with tears. You chose me. You chose this restaurant. You chose to stay so I could have a future. Afua reached across the table and held his hands. I made the right choice, she said firmly. But you sacrificed everything, Yo whispered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Afua looked at her brother, the boy she had raised, the one now becoming a man. She felt both pride and emotion rising inside her. He deserves this life, she thought. Yo leaned forward slightly. I don't want you to feel like you lost something because of me. I want you to live your dreams too. Afua smiled through her tears. You being here, successful and happy, that is my dream. Yo stood up and hugged her again, this time with even more emotion. The customers nearby quietly looked away, respecting the moment. In that small restaurant, surrounded by ordinary tables and simple walls, a powerful truth filled the room. Love sometimes means giving up your own path so someone else can walk theirs. And Afua had done it without asking for anything in return. The moment that black car stopped outside, everything inside the restaurant changed. The dinner rush had just begun when the restaurant filled with its usual energy. Plates were moving quickly from the kitchen to the tables. Customers were laughing, talking, and enjoying their meals. Afua was moving between tables with focused calm, ensuring everyone was served. Kofi was in the back, washing dishes as steam rose around him. The sound of running water mixed with the kitchen noise, creating a steady rhythm. Everything felt normal. Then, suddenly, a deep engine sound approached from outside. It was different from the usual cars passing by. It was low, smooth, powerful. One by one, people near the windows turned their heads. A sleek black luxury car stopped directly in front of the restaurant. The engine went silent. For a moment, no one moved. The car's polished surface reflected the streetlights, shining against the modest buildings around it. It looked completely out of place on this quiet corner. Afua noticed the change in the room. She glanced toward the window and saw the car. Her heart slowed. Why would a car like that stop here? The driver stepped out first, dressed in formal attire, opening the back door with respect. Then a tall, well-dressed businessman stepped onto the sidewalk. He wore a dark suit, perfectly tailored. His presence was calm but commanding. Without looking around, he adjusted his jacket and walked toward the restaurant entrance. Inside, the customers began whispering. Is that for someone inside? Maybe it's a mistake. Afua stood still behind the counter, watching carefully. The man opened the restaurant door. The bell above it rang softly. He stepped inside with steady confidence. The room fell quiet. Even the kitchen noise seemed to slow. His eyes scanned the space until they landed on the back of the restaurant. On Kofi. Kofi had just finished rinsing a stack of plates. When he looked up and saw the man standing near the entrance, his body became tense. His hands paused. This time, he thought quietly. The businessman walked forward, his footsteps calm but deliberate. Customers watched in silence. Afua felt something shift in the air. It was not fear but anticipation. The man stopped near the counter. Kofi, he said clearly. The sound of that name carried weight. Afua turned slowly toward Kofi. Her expression changed from confusion to concern. The businessman spoke again, his voice steady. It's time to come home. The words echoed softly in the room. Afua looked between the two men, trying to understand. Home? Kofi's jaw tightened slightly. The truth was no longer hiding. The black luxury car outside was not random. It was here for him. And in that moment, everyone in the restaurant realized this was not an ordinary visit. Something far bigger had just entered their quiet world. And nothing would ever feel the same again. The man washing dishes in the back was actually heir to a billion-dollar empire. The restaurant was frozen in silence. Customers held their breath. Staff stood still. Even the kitchen sounds had stopped. The businessman stepped further inside, his presence calm but powerful. He looked directly at Kofi. Kofi Ansa, he said clearly. The full name echoed through the room. Afua felt her heart tighten. Kofi slowly set the dish he was holding down. He removed his gloves and turned to face the man. The businessman continued, his voice steady. Your time here is complete. It is time to return home. Whispers began spreading across the restaurant. Home? Afua looked at Kofi, searching his face for answers. He didn't speak immediately. His expression was serious now, different from the calm dishwasher she had known. The businessman turned slightly toward Afua and the staff. This young man is not who you think he is, he said gently. He is the son of a billionaire. The words hit the room like a sudden wave. A billionaire? The customers exchanged shocked looks. Afua's hands slowly lowered from the counter. Her mind struggled to process what she had just heard. The businessman explained further. Kofi has been living here for 30 days, working under a different identity. No money, no privileges. This was his father's decision. A test of character. The room felt smaller. Every eye turned toward Kofi. Afua's chest felt tight. Was everything a lie? She thought. Kofi finally spoke, his voice calm but emotional. I didn't come here to hurt anyone. Afua looked at him, her eyes searching. You let me believe you were just a dishwasher, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried pain. Kofi stepped forward slightly. I needed to learn what real life feels like, he explained. My father wanted me to understand responsibility, humility, and work. He paused. But what I found here was more than a lesson. Afua's eyes shimmered with confusion. The businessman continued, confirming the truth. Kofi is the heir to Ansa Capital Group, a global business empire. His father arranged this experience so he could grow. The words felt unreal. The dishwasher, the quiet helper, the man who fixed machines and smiled gently at customers. A billionaire's son. Afua stepped back slightly, her emotions rising. She had trusted him. Shared conversations. Late-night talks. Even moments that felt personal. How could I not see it? She wondered silently. But at the same time, she remembered his kindness. His patience. The way he listened. The room was silent except for soft breathing. Kofi looked at Afua directly. I never wanted to pretend forever, he said. But I didn't expect to meet someone like you. Afua's expression shifted between shock and emotion. The truth had changed everything. Yet something inside her still felt connected to the man standing in front of her. Because even if his identity was different, the feelings had been real. And now, standing in the middle of the restaurant, everyone understood that this was no ordinary dishwasher. This was the moment the secret could no longer stay hidden. The restaurant was quiet after the truth was revealed. The black car still waited outside, but inside the room, time felt slower. Afua stood near the counter, her emotions written clearly on her face. Shock, hurt, confusion, but also something else. Something she did not want to admit. Kofi took a small step forward. I know this is overwhelming, he began gently, and I understand if you feel betrayed. His voice was steady, but sincere. I didn't come here to deceive you. I came here because my father gave me a challenge. I needed to live without my name, without my money. I needed to understand real work, real responsibility. He paused, looking at the familiar walls of the restaurant. But I never expected to find something real here. Afua's eyes softened slightly, though her guard was still up. Kofi continued, I didn't expect to meet someone like you. Someone who works harder than anyone I know. Someone who gave up her own dreams for her family. I learned more in this kitchen than I ever learned in any business school. The room remained silent. Even the customers were listening carefully. Afua's voice was quiet when she finally spoke. So everything, the conversations, the late nights, the moments we shared, was it all part of your father's test? Kofi shook his head firmly. No. The job was the test. But you were never part of it. He stepped closer, careful not to pressure her. You were not planned. You were not expected. And that is what made everything real. Afua searched his eyes. For a moment she saw no billionaire, no empire, just the same man who washed dishes beside her. The same man who listened when she talked about her dreams. The same man who fixed machines and treated everyone with respect. Could someone fake kindness for so long? She wondered. Her heart felt torn between hurt and understanding. You should have told me, she said softly. I know, Kofi replied immediately. And I am truly sorry. I was afraid of losing what we built. I didn't want you to treat me differently because of my name. Silence filled the space between them. Then Kofi said something that changed the air completely. I fell in love with you before I told anyone the truth. I fell in love with your strength, your honesty, the way you carry everyone else's burdens without complaining. His voice was calm but full of emotion. I did not fall in love because I was pretending. I fell in love because you are real. Afua's eyes filled with tears, not because she believed everything instantly, but because she could feel the sincerity in his words. She thought about their conversations, the laughter in the kitchen, the promise of honesty, the shared dreams. None of that felt fake. Slowly, her anger began to soften into understanding. Love had grown between them in the most unexpected place. Not because of money, not because of status, but because of shared humanity. Afua took a deep breath. I am still processing all of this, she admitted. Kofi nodded respectfully. I will give you time. Whatever you decide, I will accept it. In that moment, something changed inside both of them. The test was over. But their journey was just beginning. And standing in a small restaurant with mismatched chairs and a black luxury car waiting outside, they realized that love sometimes survives even the biggest secrets. Moral: true love is not built on perfect circumstances, but on honesty, growth, and the courage to forgive.